thing over and over and over again, and like I kept using the same slides over and over and over again. So I was here last year giving my IMS talk, and then like 2 hours later I went into a talk with Dan Rinsel where he talked about his LTI bacon, cheese, ham sandwich, whatever it was, the ham sandwich. And I realized that Dan Rinsel's presentation was like 5 times better than my presentation. And it was well done, it was well thought out, it was thorough, it was complete, and it made my presentation look kind of bad. And you'll notice that I'm not giving a presentation about LTI at this conference, and that's because other people...
There are still a lot of presentations on LTI.
But other people can communicate it better than I can. And so it really, a year ago at this conference for me was a tipping point where I realized I didn't have to push. My pushing part had been done, and it had taken off on its own, and I could just kind of sit back and be amazed at all the crazy things that happen.
Phil.
Sure.
So, what's the best way that we can all leverage these standards across Moodle rooms or across Sakai or across Blackboard Learn?
Yeah, so I think that's where the open source nature and open standards nature are really, really important. I think it's important that all of us, both vendors, creators of software, as well as customers and users of software, really embrace these standards and kind of force people to use them. I mean, I think it's both a push and a pull. Mark was just talking, and I think he's right. The Moodle community is not necessarily the best place for LTI to grow because they already have an open standard of I can just write this against Moodle, right? So we've got to do a good job of evangelizing within the Moodle community. You know, we should build stuff using LTI. I think it's important for customers, for users to understand the cost efficiencies that are gained. There are things that we're doing at Moodle rooms. We have a cloud version of Moodle that we call Joule, and so we have to run all of our plugins and stuff through a pretty rigorous code screening process to make sure it works in our cloud environment. But now we're saying to our vendors, if you use LTI, that process can be kind of short-circuited because we don't have to worry about that, right? So how can we take the efficiencies that we've gained and pass those on to our customers, and how can customers say to their vendors, when you guys want to go sign up for a new tool, say, hey, we really would like to use your new tool, but we're only using tools that are LTI compliant because those are the ones that we think integrate the best, or those are the ones that give our teachers the most consistent interface or the most consistent user experience. So I think it's really incumbent on all of us to pressure each other, vendors, users, and that alike, to force each other to use those standards, because the broader they're adopted, the network effects really build on each other, and I think that's really important.
I would say that, Christy, your question really is across all of them. And actually that's part of the reason that I joined Blackboard. Because last year I saw that the basic idea of having a simple way to put tools into a learning management system, that idea had been bought, hook, line, and sinker. But the problem with LTI, and we did this very much on purpose, is it's very incomplete. It's like about a 60% solution, if that. And so as soon as someone takes LTI, they go like, oh, this is the best thing ever. And how come you don't have blank?
Roster.
Roster, right, exactly. Why don't you have roster? And so how are we going to get to the point where we have roster and the 10 or 20 other things? And it took so long to get to the point where it took like 3 years to get to the point where we had LTI ready to take off. I don't want to take another 3 years to get roster to take off. And then I don't want another 3 years to take a content API to take off. And I don't want to take another 3. I mean, that's like 30 years, right? I mean, we do not have 30 years to transform education, and we need the way we need to do it. And that's where sitting across the table with Learn and Sakai and Moodle, Angel, sitting together, we can say, let's move. We don't have to have one little evangelist running around and like whacking each one, hoping that 3 years from now we'll get what we need. Because the whole thing has to accelerate. It has to accelerate on behalf of the user so we can accomplish what Tom said, and that is it's got to be consistent, it's got to feel good, and it's got to be like the best way to do things, not just, hey, it's the most convenient, it's very efficient, yada, yada, yada. And so I think that's That's the thing that's different this minute, right? Is we have this coordination because we have 5 LMSs in sort of the same umbrella, and I think we can influence the market in a positive and good way to move all this forward more rapidly.
And basically what's happened, I think, is that the conversation has shifted, right? A year and a half ago, it was about why LTI, et cetera. And then, as Chuck said, bam, it all just kind of clicked. And now the conversation is about how, right? And so the conversations that I have with folks about LTI is center more on, well, how do I actually use this with the services I have on campus? Would it be good for me to take this library service I have and LTI enable it so that I can more easily integrate it with the other services that I have on campus? Absolutely, right? And Chuck will show you how. But I think also when we're talking about the standards, we've been talking about LTI, and I think that's because it's the big buzz right now, okay? But I think another very significant standard is LIS, okay? Because that actually impacts you also on the ground, but very immediately because it enables you to interact with your LIS compliant SIS systems, for example. But again, the conversation I think I'm trying to shift it a little bit, because LIS is actually useful beyond the context of the SIS system, right? You can actually use it to provision accounts and information across additional services. So it's about changing the conversation as well as moving the standards forward.
I like your progression of why LTI and how LTI, and I would push it one more step into like wow LTI, because I think Chuck gave us a good example of why certain examples take us, the extra yards. When someone can present on LTI and have something really great happening, that's when it clicks for the rest of us. That's when it says, oh, this is a fantastic example of how things could change in my classroom. So the wow LTI stage, I think that we need to be in, or the wow LIS stage is hey, look, this is the kind of experience you could actually have. I work on a little lab team at Little Rooms on code that we aren't necessarily going to put into production. But we put LIS into Moodle so it could get all the goodness from the SIS systems. But then while we were at it, we turned it into a provider as well. So now Moodle with our system can actually send stuff out as well. And we began daisy chaining Moodle sites and saying, well, maybe I don't need to have a multi-tenant system. Maybe I can just send that data through LIS up to another site through a system like that. It's when those kinds of wow experiences and those kinds of examples and you say, well, I can save so much time by spending a little more effort around a standard rather than jerry-rigging something entirely on my own, that it becomes really totally exciting.
But I just wrap that one up from my perspective to say we very much agree on the going from how to the wow, and the other one I'll throw in there would be now. That what we're really looking for are some of these really nice examples of interoperability between one LTI tool and multiple LMSs. I'm sure Chuck's clever enough to have seen these things several years ago, but for normal humans and the rest of us, in particular a lot of the academic stuff, they would very much struggle to sort of grasp the concept of what we're talking about and the potential power of some of these tools which we could be using with multiple LMSs. So there's a project for someone to come up with some teacher accessible presentations to show how this works. It's done from a teaching and learning perspective. I think once we get some of those cases that we can really publicise, then I think that's when it's really going to hit. Personally,
I can't say anything on this one because I can't think of any more rhyming words.
Well, it's I like to go use a Blue Man Group analogy in this situation. Blue Man Group starts out, at least last time I saw them, telling how plumbing connects us all together, right? Rich or poor, sooner or later, we're all connected by plumbing. And frankly, we are wowing about plumbing, right? And what you're saying is that We've got to get to the point where we're wowing about what we're doing with it. Now, not just wowing like, look, the toilet flushed. That's just amazing. Look at it. It goes around and then it fills back up and you can flush it again. Look at that. And so we've got to get to the point where some teacher goes, I'm just using it, right?
This is actually funnier because when we were doing our rehearsal before, we had a question of can we cuss? And there's a really good joke in there about the plumbing and everybody using the toilet, but we couldn't really decide on whether or not we could swear in front of people or not. So you guys can all make your own joke.